Okay, perfect. Yeah, sounds good. All right. Okay,
Your
perfect.
class, remind me, class of what?
2005.
2005.
Yeah, like when the youngins,
Yeah.
you know, call me or something like that. I'm feeling older and
Oh
older
my God,
nowadays.
please.
Like,
Girl.
you know, class of 2000. I'm like, oh, 2005. I think someone who's class of 2011 had emailed me, and I'm like, oh boy, 2011. I was knee deep in ramen and snowstorms by then. You know.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, President Pelton, well, I guess outgoing President Pelton,
Yes.
thank you so much for taking some time for this.
Well, thank you for being here, and it's a real pleasure to have someone from the class of 2005 back here and having this conversation. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
So how does it feel? You know, we have gone through a pandemic. Your last year or so here has been in a pandemic and having to adjust to that.
Yeah.
We're taping this on a time where it's the 1-year anniversary of the
Yes.
state of emergency being declared here in Massachusetts. So how does it feel for you right now?
Well, you know, I often quote Bart Giamatti, who was president of Yale and stepped down from presidency at Yale and went on to be baseball commissioner. Unfortunately, he died in his first year as baseball commissioner. But he used to say that being a college president is no way for an adult to make a living. And so it felt that way this year. It was a very, very complex, difficult, trying, intense year for us and obviously for human society broadly. But we came out on the other side of it very, very well. We had a safe opening in the fall, a positivity rate during the fall of less than 1/3 of 1/10 of 1%. And we were, we were able to, engage the community and have some students come back and be present here. It took an enormous amount of work, and it was very challenging, but I'm proud of what we were able to achieve. We had to make some reductions in our budget, but we did not have to lay off or fire a single person. And for that, I am very, very pleased and very proud.
As we were talking about the pandemic, I imagine with a school of kids in the performing arts who are used to theaters of adoring fans, it must have been a challenge to make sure that they got the full experience here as well.
It was a challenge, but both students and faculty were enormously creative and innovative and invented new ways of putting together a theatrical production. As part of our de-densification plan, we essentially reduced our very vertical campus to a horizontal campus so that almost all of our activities were on the first 4 floors. Mm-hmm. Above that were a lot of office spaces, and that were not occupied. 85% of our faculty, and 85% of our employees were working off campus. And so students turned those offices into tiny studios. And so they would do their piece in that studio, film it all over the place, and then through their magic, create a pastiche of all those performances as if they were on stage talking to one another or engaging with one another in a production. And so sometimes you would think, well, yeah, this is theater, but it also feels a bit like a film. And so there was that quality to it, but the product was excellent.
Creativity always wins out here at Emerson.
Yes, indeed.
I know that for sure.
Indeed.
The campus looks a lot different, and there was a plan that you have put in place to make the campus, move into the 21st century or move into the next century. And so I wanted you to reflect a little bit about that and the work you've done in that space.
Yeah. Well, the most important thing to remember is that while Emerson was founded in 1880, the campus and the college that we now know really started in 1992 when my predecessor, Jackie Liebergott, who was just an extraordinary leader, began the move from Beacon Street to here. doubled the size of the college, the faculty, staff, and so on and so forth, and began to, as a pioneer in what was then called the combat zone,
Yes.
created this campus. So that was the first phase, and I count that phase from 1992 to 2011, and when I arrived. So I was part of the second phase, and I see my time here as an evolution, a further evolution, phase 2 of a 28-year old campus and college, recognizing that we are embedded in the city, and just as we inspire Boston, Boston inspires us, and that anything that we want to do architecturally or with our campus footprint, it's really has an impact on the city, and so we've been very, very careful in the way we've moved forward with that.
As we were talking about, sort of changing the footprint of the blueprint here at Emerson, a lot has been made of expanding Emerson's global reach and connecting. I was part of the Castle program, and that was an extraordinary experience, I have to say, and also one that I may not have been able to have, given my personal background growing up, and then I was able to come to Emerson and have this rich experience. So when we're talking about expanding Emerson globally, you've worked really hard in making sure that reach extends to other countries, and I wonder if you could speak about that.
Well, a French philosopher once said that the future is not what it used to be. And there are those who see the future and they hide from it, and there are those who see the future and they run towards it. And so that's what we're seeking to do at Emerson, and especially around our global programs. I mean, we all know that we live in a global world, commerce, economics, labor, it's all interconnected. And many of our students, and certainly some of our faculty, will live and work in a country outside of the U.S. borders. And so they need to be culturally aware, culturally competent, and culturally equipped to thrive in those environments. So we set out to create for Emerson as the global hub of arts, communication, and liberal arts in the world. And we have created that niche for ourselves. Of course, we had the Castle for many years, a program that I think that you participated in. I think of the LA campus as a study abroad program in a foreign country called Los Angeles, because that's what it is. It's our students. It's not degree bearing. They go to Los Angeles, especially the seniors for the most part, for a semester, take internships, and it's a great entree into the entertainment industry. Then we set up a campus in Paris and offered a BFA there, and then another campus through a partnership in Switzerland. And we've also established another partnership in Sydney. And that was scheduled to be open in 2020. It was delayed, and our hope is that it will be open in 21 or 22 at the latest.
How do you think that best prepares folks, and you touched on this a little bit, but how do you think it best prepares the students coming out of Emerson to succeed in their chosen fields when they've had this global experience?
Well, they will have a broad exposure to different cultures, and they will be culturally sensitive to their work environment and the places in which they live and work, and so we think that's enormously beneficial.
So I'm the first time I think we actually had a good conversation was when I interviewed you for our Black History Month series, and I think one quote that really stuck with me was about teaching, especially students of color, how to move into spaces and know that sort of invisible language of networking and feeling like you belong there. You've been very outspoken about racial justice, and you recently penned a particular essay called "America on Fire." Talk to me a little bit about, in writing that essay, what was going through your mind and what was the experience that you were having as the first Black president of Emerson College, as someone who was a leader in a space of academics, of students also needing to navigate the racial reckoning that the country, that the state, that the city of Boston was going through.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the genesis of that. It was earlier in the week that George Floyd was killed by Derek Chauvin, the Minneapolis police officer. And I was really busy and I couldn't focus on what had occurred. But that Friday of that week, I, rather than sleeping, I stayed up and I watched that 8-minute and 46-second video over and over and over again. I think I watched it at least a dozen times because I wanted to get a sense of how this could have happened. How is it possible that another man in plain sight could press his knee on the neck of another man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until he lost consciousness and cried out for his mama, and did it while he had his left hand casually in his pocket, as if nothing, it's like it was a walk in the park. And I wanted to get a sense of what was the environment, what caused that to happen. And it became clear to me there were at least three things. One is that George Floyd was invisible to the detective. He really didn't exist. He was a stick figure. Two is that there was something about his consciousness that allowed him to dehumanize him. But that consciousness of dehumanizing Black folks is very much a part of the American history and part of America today. And then finally, it became clear to me that years and years of structural and systemic racism was just a part of who he was. And so, of course, I can get away with it. There's nothing unusual about me putting my my knee on his neck, even after he's lost consciousness, left it on there for another 2 minutes. I can do this. There's nothing wrong with it. And so I was struck by that. And then my next thought was, what am I going to say? Because I usually speak out on issues like this. But I didn't want to speak out with the usual, platitudes that presidents, bring out this time of the year when this stuff happens. I didn't want to do it. I didn't know what to say. It took me a full day to figure out what I wanted to say. I spoke to my son, who generously said, because we'd had this conversation, he said, "You don't have to say anything, Dad. It's not up to you to say something. It's up to white America to say something." And, that struck with me, of course. We'd had that conversation. And then I thought of a quote by Martin Luther King. This is when he was talking about the war in Vietnam. He said, "Sometimes there comes a time when silence is betrayal." And so I knew I couldn't be silent, but I also knew that I couldn't speak merely as a president or only as a president, but that I had to speak as a Black man who was also president. And so I spoke from that perspective. And I think, that little piece, 7 to 8 million people around the world had access to it. I don't know if 7 or 8 million people read it, but 7 to 8 million people actually had access to it. And so it was compelling and more powerful than I imagined it would be. But in an essential sense, I wanted to say to the community, those who know me, that I am George Floyd too. I have a lineage. I have a connection with him. I haven't been, I've never had anybody with their knee on my neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but I've had these experiences wherever I have lived. I've had to deal with and engage with racism for my entire life. And that's the experience of many, if not all, black folks in America. And so I wanted to make that clear as a black man, but also what that meant for me as president of Emerson College.
How do you think students received it? Or I guess, how do you hope? I guess you may not know for sure, although there are a lot of vocal students, but how do you think it was received?
I think it was received well. On that Saturday, I did receive some emails from students who said to me, essentially, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you saying anything? And I wrote back to them and I said, I want you to understand that this is my lived experience and that it has had an emotional impact on me that I am working through. And I essentially said, you know, I'm really, I'm irritated by you asking me that question. And I wrote to one student and I said, this is not my problem, this is your problem. This is not a black problem, it's your problem as a white person in America. And what will you do? What will you do to make changes? And until you can figure that out, we're going to relive this over and over again. And so I worked that into my piece, and that's the way it ends. And that's the way it should end, actually.
Do you think that in taking your lived experience, and of course I think a lot of, especially people of color, black folks in leadership positions, you know, I think it's not lost on many folks that you're exhausted at the end of the day trying to be the representative of a specific voice. But do you think you were able to tap into the leadership at Emerson College to have them understand that experience, your thoughts and feelings, so that then when you move on, which we'll talk about soon, part of that work stays here at Emerson?
Yeah, I think so. And we're you know, there's a lot of work that we need to do. We need to do an honest appraisal of our culture and get to the systemic and structural issues that plague our Commonwealth of Learning, and we're going to. That's very, very hard work. What I didn't anticipate was the impact that my letter had on black leaders in Boston and beyond, because it gave them a license, and I heard this directly. You've given me a license to speak out too, and many of them did. I know that they did, and many of them did it very publicly. So I was very pleased that I, was sort of a pioneer in this way, and allowed them and let them know it was okay to be, because it's all about authenticity.
Absolutely.
And as I tell my children, there's no substitute for authenticity, none. And it gave folks an opportunity to be authentic.
What do you think? And you know, you've been in higher education for a while. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing higher education?
Well, the biggest challenge today is what it was yesterday and the day before that, and that's access and affordability. That's opening the doors of opportunity wide for young folks of all talents and abilities, and nationalities and ethnicities and races to walk through that door of opportunity, grab the opportunity, and begin to build a wonderful life for themselves. Colleges and universities are enormously expensive today. And while many places are able to provide, plentiful financial aid, especially the rich, the very wealthy schools, a lot of us are not. And so it will be my hope that we will, that after I leave, that we'll continue a process that we've just started this year, which is to increase our financial aid for students, regardless of their background.
And speaking of, as you are leaving higher education and moving on to the Boston Foundation and creating opportunity, we know that the Boston Foundation is this amazing resource to create opportunity. How does it feel? When the opportunity came up to you to take on this leadership position at the Boston Foundation, were you a little bit nervous? Were you, I guess, walk me through what that thought process was like.
Well, when I was initially approached, I was surprised. This wasn't on my radar screen at all. I hadn't thought about this as a possibility. I didn't seek this job. But I haven't really had to apply for a job in about 35 years. So people sort of seek me out. So I was honored to be asked.
Yeah.
And I think I was asked because through Emerson and through my activities outside of Emerson, I've developed a civic leadership, especially around racial equity and so on. I probably, a year ago, I sat on 6 or 7 nonprofits, maybe more. But I have a real, and I've always had a real passion for civic engagement and civic leadership. And I've done it on a part-time basis for 3 decades. And so now I get to do full-time what I've done part-time. And that is to wake up in the morning and ask myself this question: how am I going to improve lives and strengthen communities? And that is just a wonderful, that's the most wonderful job description in the world for me.
How do you think the work you've done so far, and you mentioned about your nonprofit, the work in your volunteering in nonprofits, but how do you think, I got to think being a president of a college, of multiple colleges, and working in the space and having to troubleshoot and dealing with all kinds of projects and people and things like that translate into a job like the one you're going into. What kind of, lessons have you learned that you're going to be carrying into this new space?
Well, first of all, I'm a very strategic person. And so, I came in the first year, we developed a strategy. I announced it at my inauguration. It's 5-point strategy, 5 pinnacles of excellence. And that has been the backbone of all that we've done here, is those five pinnacles of excellence, as I call them. So I'll be able to take my strategic inclinations there as it has been here. I've learned and grown in terms of being innovative and creative, and I'll be able to take those attributes there as well. I have a lot of capacity. I work very long, hard hours, and I will continue to do that at TBF. I am motivated by values. Everything that we do here and everything that I do is rooted in some value. So values of compassion, values of thinking outside of oneself, values of being, committed to the larger society, the value of lifting up voices that have been quiet and silent for so long, the values of supporting young people to see themselves in their own futures so that they can become the people they were meant to be. So I will take all of those values with me to the Boston Foundation. The Boston Foundation was founded in 1915. It's the second oldest foundation in America. We have $1.5 billion in assets. Some of those are in so-called donor-advised funds, but we also have a discretionary fund where we make grants in the region, and that distinguishes the Boston Foundation from other community foundations. And so we'll continue our grant making. We'll continue to encourage our donors to make gifts, and the Boston Foundation has a civic leadership role in terms of the research that it does and the partnerships that it develops, the way in which it convenes folks around important issues. And so I'm looking forward to being part of all of that. Last year, TBF contributed $215 million in grant funding. A lot of that going towards equity funding. So it's a natural progression for me to be at the Boston Foundation.
President Pelton, or I'm just going to call you President Pelton.
Yeah.
Even if I see you in the street, I'm just going to be like, President Pelton, what's going on? What do you hope, think, believe your legacy here at Emerson will be as you move on to this new space? And I know that's always a question people ask someone who's like retiring forever and going to go sip, a nice drink on the beach somewhere, which I know you're going to be on the grind at TBF. But what do you hope your legacy will be here?
Well, first of all, I would say I'm known on campus as Lee.
Okay,
and
there you go.
I jokingly say only my kids have to call me President Pelton. Everybody else calls me Lee, which is, and I prefer that actually.
Okay.
Well, I hope that the principal legacy will be this, that the work that we've been able to do here, it's not just my work, it's our work. This is a community of students, faculty, and staff, and they all have agency, and I've tried to make sure that they have agency in the work that we do, and so that when they come to work every day, they have a sense that they're coming to a place that is aspirational. I often say that excellence is not about being something, it's about becoming something. And so excellence will always be about continuous improvement. And so with that in mind, I hope that my legacy is that the college will find a president who is so much better than me and that will bring new ideas, fresh ideas to the college and continue to invent it and nurture it and provide nourishment for it to become one of the great commonwealths of learning in the world.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lee.
Thank you. Thank you.
And good luck. Good luck at the Boston Foundation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been, Crystal, thank you. It's so great to have been here with you. Thank you very much. Thanks.